good afternoon. So we've heard from lots of fintechs and banks over the last 2 days, but who's powering and running the technology behind them? So we have Ronan and Mike with us here today. Why don't you kick us off by telling us a bit more about yourself?
For sure. So I'm Mike Walters. I'm the co-founder and CPO of Form3. We're a technology provider that runs managed services for banks and financial institutions to support them with their payment technology.
Thanks, Mike. Ronan, I lead the payments vertical for Google Cloud out of London. Form3 is one of my clients. Let's join us on stage. My clients include FTSE-listed companies like TransferWise, Revolut, through to VC-backed companies like Form3. They all use Google Cloud, due to the reliability and scalability that we power the web, 40% of the web every day with, to power their businesses.
Now, Mike, can you tell us a bit more about the work that Form3 does?
For sure. So we've been around for about 7 years now. We process around about 100 million transactions a month for financial institutions. They range in size from relatively small challenger fintechs all the way through to large international tier 1 banks. And I guess the key sort of value that we add to those organizations is to take a block of technology that historically would have run inside a legacy data center estate and move that onto a platform that we run to allow those payments to be connected to different pieces of payment infrastructure around the world. So we do that in the UK, we do that in Europe, we do that now in the US. For cross-border transactions, and increasingly because we run that as a platform in the cloud, we're able to start to expand that into fraud prevention services in real time for transactions.
Now, Ronan, how does Google enable Form3 to do the work that it does?
Sure. So we worked with Form3's engineering team, I think about 2.5 years ago, to create a payment gateway or gateways for payments from scratch. So now that can run hot, which means 2 active environments between ourselves and AWS, to have the ability, in theory, to orchestrate payments in real time between those 2. So technically that's what we do, but I think the important point is how we work together. So we don't just simply provide the technology, the tools in order for Form3 to do this, it's how we do that work together. So I think, Mike, to be fair, Form3 is probably the most technically able client that we've got. Your engineers are really proud about how good they are technically, and you recruit people globally to do that. But more so than what I do with other clients, we help you on that journey by working in partnership. So we do things like we train your team on how to use the tools. We obviously give you credits to give you sandboxes to play in. We provide ad hoc technical support, but we also do other things like give you access to our roadmap, and we get involved in growing your top line. So we introduce Form3 to lots of our other tier 1 banks so they can work in synergy with each other.
And I guess I probably should just follow up and explain a little bit maybe about the way that we think about sort of resilience in this space and sort of why we started the relationship with GCP. So when we started about sort of 7 years ago, essentially...
Could you just explain what GCP?
Sorry, Google Cloud. I guess, and Ronan probably would acknowledge this as well. About 7 years ago, look, if you wanted to build fast into a cloud environment, you did it in AWS. Yeah, there were very limited choices, particularly if you were trying to run in a model that had extreme high resilience. So multiple data centers running in real time together. And if you're going to do payments for tier 1 banks, it's kind of table stakes. And I guess what's happened over the course of the last sort of 3 or 4 years is, as our presence with those larger organizations has started to evolve, the question really becomes, okay, well, in that space, even given that, what happens if AWS exit that market? What happens if there's a service delivery issue in a particular cloud provider? What do you do? And so we set about a journey to take our technology and convert it from something that was very specific to AWS into something that was very generic and agnostic to cloud provider, so that we could add GCP into that mix, which means that now in our estate, if a transaction hits a problem in AWS and still needs to complete for a customer, that same transaction will in real time complete through GCP, and the same the other way around. And so we're tackling head on this idea of how do we evidence a superior level of support and resilience when we're dealing with the volume of multiple large-scale customers?
Let's get to the juicy bit then, shall we? How does the cloud-enabled environment, how has it changed things? Why is it significant? And is it the next frontier for payment providers?
I'd argue it's the only frontier. I think the traditionally run legacy DC tier one banking systems are antiquated, frankly. They're at risk of threat from cybersecurity. They also can run quite slowly. You can't innovate in them. But if you look at some of the key themes which define the global future of payments, they're things like the regulatory need for two-factor authentication, fraud detection, cross-border payments, real-time payments, crypto, etc. You can't do those things. You can't innovate quickly enough in a traditional data center environment to be able to do that, which is why, to my mind, the cloud is the only answer. It's the only frontier. But Mike?
It's why we started here, right? So our founding hypothesis was, if you're gonna operate and try and deal with all of the regulatory changes imposed on large-scale financial institutions, or indeed any financial institutions, the volume of that, if you operate in more than one market, is just increasing significantly. And 90% plus of the change budget in large financial institutions was geared towards just keep the thing working. And that's just not sustainable, right? It appears in the cost-income ratios of tier one banks all over the world, particularly retail ones. And so the only way to tackle that is to make your change more frequent, smaller, more efficient, faster, and to do that in a way where you can still maintain the resilience and security. And the only technical answer to that, that is cost-effective, is to look at public cloud. Otherwise, every individual financial institution has to create the equivalent of a Google cloud just for themselves. And there are a handful of banks in the world where that even becomes close to being a cost-efficient answer. And it still doesn't solve the other questions of how you change your method and your approach. So I think what cloud does is allows for really specialist technology providers like Form3 and others to take their area of expertise and have it consumed by financial institutions all over the world. And that's only possible in a platform model, and it's only possible on a cloud technology stack.
So when we were in the green room, we were discussing some examples. So can you tell us, where are neobanks versus incumbents on this journey?
From a payment services provider adoption model, I think what you've seen, if you cast your mind back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, is the big banks, the big tier one banks did everything, right? They did insurance, they did current accounts, they did payments, everything in the gamut. I think what you've seen is the disaggregation of all of those services. So now to have specialist providers of, a banking as a service, bank in a box, for example, Thought Machine, can come and set up a bank, and then you can get another company that could do insurance, you get another company that could do payments, in the case of Form3, for example. So what a neobank's done is created the core banking services, but it's built on the cloud, that's what they all do, but it's API enabled, which means you can bolt on services like payments very, very easily and quickly. And I'd imagine, Mike, that's where you guys started, because that's low-hanging fruit, and now you've moved into the more complex beasts of tier one banks. Is that right?
Completely. So whilst it's technically possible for a developer to sit down and 4 hours later be able to transact with our environments, to do that in a safe way at scale for very large financial institutions is just a bigger challenge, right? They just have more legacy to deal with. And so, the organizations that have adopted this idea of consuming other specialist technology providers is a neobank model, but it's very agile, it's very fast, it's very rapid to change. But you need to have an appreciation and awareness and an ability to consume those types of technologies in a really robust way. And I guess the journey that tier one banks are on is to, having done that in some areas of their environments, they're now starting to look at the really core bits. So they're starting to look at the actual ledgers and the payment tech that they run and saying, well, now can we do it for something mission critical? Yeah. And that's what we've been doing with these guys. So our journey over the last sort of 7 years has been, organizations that can adopt really fast did, and so our client book moved from small, agile, technology-aware financial institutions. So people like eBury, people like PPS, people like SumUp, these sort of organisations, and has evolved now to be focused much more on where the volume in payment land is, which is in tier 1 banks. These guys still maintain 90% plus of the in-market payment volume, and they're now getting to the point where they're ready to consume in a similar way to neobanks. So people like Nationwide, all of their consumer production traffic is on our estate, and those organisations that have made those sorts of steps are investing in how they can consume not just us but other technologies as well.
So tell us a bit more about some of the challenges in the cloud-enabled environment.
I'll be completely honest, with you, cloud has got so many mines to watch out for, and I can say that, having been in cloud for a few years now. I think as it relates to payments, the payment value chain is really complex. You've got merchant acquirers on one side, card issuing on another, networks in the middle, and they all hand off to different services. It's very disaggregated, and Form3 is just one slither in this. So that's got advantages because everybody can be nimble, right? But the challenges, to answer your question, Aisha, is, I would argue, the predominant challenge is one of security and resilience. So how do you create that network where you can ensure that a payment flow happens in a matter of seconds? I use my Wise card to pay for something contactless. The alert comes through on my phone before it's having gone through all Wise's servers based on Google, on my phone quicker than it does on the merchant terminal. I find that boggling, mind-boggling. But that's a real technical challenge to make the security between all those, which is powered through APIs, absolutely seamless. I think the second one I'll touch upon is cost control. I think cloud created this nirvana 5-10 years ago where it was cheaper than building a data center. And do you know what? It's not when you can amortize the CapEx cost of a data center. It gives you loads of other benefits, and it can be cheaper if you use it in the right way. So cost control and optimization, the FinOps practice, I think is really, really key. I was telling Mike upstairs, I had a client contact me last week that left an ML script running overnight. It got stuck in a loop, came back to work on Monday, and they had a $50,000 bill because they just forgot to turn something off. So what we're very careful of with GCP is to create the security and cost control guardrails around those projects to stop those sort of overruns from happening. Anything to add?
Yeah, I guess as a banker from background, I guess the big difference is your way of working as an organisation to safely consume cloud for something critical is just different. It's just different. It's not about taking the same developers and giving them a new tool, and it's not about a model that says, here's my development and build arm, here's my run team, here's my security team, and then trying to work out how to do it. I think that the most complicated thing about using cloud in a safe and resilient way is engineering your entire business to consume cloud. That is not a trivial exercise. And we had the advantage of being able to start with a blank sheet of paper, only recruit the 1 in every 100 engineers that apply to us who are in 30 different countries, working completely remote, consuming tools that were designed and built only to work in the cloud, to run technology which is years and years ahead of what we've seen in our competitive environment and inside our customers. And we've had the opportunity to design an entire organisation to focus on that problem. So I guess the biggest sort of barrier, challenge, or risk associated with a transition to cloud is it's not actually just about technology. It's about the people, it's about the culture, it's about the organizational structure, it's about your readiness to release 10, 15 times into production a day rather than once every 6 months. It's about how you test. And I guess all of those things are unique to each business. So it's about understanding the bits that you're strong at and how far down those sort of extremes you need to go to be able to make the best of the tools that that Google and AWS and others provide. Right? If you can't use them, it doesn't matter how good they are.
Yeah.
Well, just on that point, so what's the adoption been like in the last few years? What kind of shifts have you noticed in the ways
from a customer?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think typically the model here is that we've observed in our customers is those that are not born cloud native create cloud centers of excellence. and they hone in on how do we do things differently in that way. So they look at full sec DevOps models, so integration of security personnel into development teams who then run that code in production. That's what we do. So, the same engineer that wrote the code gets woken up if there's a problem with it. And if that problem relates to something we're concerned about from a security perspective, it's the same individual that was embedded in that team. So I guess the way that we've seen clients who are not cloud native start to move is to try and create those environments of cloud centers of excellence in a ring-fenced way, so that they can use all of those tools and they can create those business models. But I think there's still a lot of work to do that effectively inside a bank than you can do that as a technology provider outside. And I guess that's where the tensions are.
Yeah, and I think there's also a shift in emphasis of cloud. I think previously cloud was looked as a way of doing infrastructure, just replicate, lift and shift, data center, put it in the cloud, do it easier, cheaper, better. But now I think there's a recognition that cloud can actually add a lot of value, particularly when it comes to data. So a lot of the work that we're doing with payment companies now is about how do you, so payments is really rich in data. So with ISO 222 coming out, there's 23 fields of data for every single payment transaction. So how can we use Google tools to harvest that data and to use that data in a smart way to add value to payment providers and start to monetize that data? And really that's where Google excels. If you think about it, we're the world's biggest data company. We carry 40% of the world's traffic through the internet all the time. We're good with data. And that's really where I see our differentiator happening. It's about a value add as opposed to a commoditized compute type resource where cloud was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Now looking ahead, where do you see this technology advancing?
So I think for us, I think Ronan's touched on it a little bit. I think for us, the interesting direction of travel for this technology is really about how we can leverage the emergence of those types of tools, the emergence of AI particularly, and in a platform environment, how we can just take a shot at fraud, right? So if you're an individual bank, it's really difficult, of any size actually, it's really difficult to get enough data to be able to see particularly transactions that are inbound to you. Like understanding whether that is a good or bad transaction is really difficult. And I guess one of the really powerful things about being able to run a cloud native platform, extend that into more customers and extend that into more geographic markets is that we can start to look at how does fraud in the UK, which is quite a mature real-time market, how has that evolved? How is that evolving differently in Europe as an emerging real-time environment? And how does that compare with the US, which is a nascent real-time environment? And actually, how do we take those learnings and that tool set and that platform model and preempt as the volumes increase in those environments at a frighteningly fast rate? How do we preempt that sort of challenge from the orchestrated fraud environments that we see? And I guess you can't do that at all in a fractured, distributed set of individual data points set in individual banks. It's just not possible. And there's only really one technical solution to that, which is public cloud. And I think there's only one way to really fix that, which is to have best-of-breed technology providers who gun at those problems, because they're just super difficult if you're an individual bank.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about when you make a payment on your phone, you have to go through two-factor authentication. It's kind of clunky at the best of times, and I think now what we're going to see is the conversions of lots of technology, like Google produces handsets, we also produce Android operating system. So if you can start to fuse data, as I said before, to, for example, for fraud, to look at where that device is in any particular time, you can start to meld data sets and decrease the clunkiness of that two-factor authentication, for example. RTP, I agree with you, that's going to boom in the next few years, and the implications for fraud's big. I think cross-border transactions are going to increase into the mainstream, and lots of us use Wise and Revolut and that sort of thing. But the costs are going to come down, and the complexity will come down with that too.
Well, we've heard a lot about cloud-enabled technology and how it's accelerated growth in Fintechs and other financial institutions. Mike and Ronan, thank you very much.
Thank you.